Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us at All About Us Radio, where we empower women. And my topic today is touching bases and getting in touch with those family members that are affected by cerebral palsy. I have Dr. Adine Usher, who's a special educator who has taught, lectured, consulted, and advocated for students with orthopedic and neuromuscular disabilities for nearly 6 decades. Cerebral palsy has been her entire focus, and she has served as a classroom teacher, a staff developer, a health coordinator who facilitates the activities for teachers and service professionals and support staff for individuals that are affected by cerebral palsy. Dr. Usher was a member of the Special Education Graduate School faculty at Bank Street College of Education in New York City. And since 2003, she has worked with families, school systems, consultants, done international work for individuals affected by cerebral palsy. She is also a member of the United Cerebral Palsy, and she works as a specialist for children's program run by the United Cerebral Palsy of New York City, and continues to provide professional development, local, nationally, and internationally at the National Center for Disabled People in San Fernando, Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Usher has written numerous articles. She has recently published a book on this area, and she received her degree from Oberlin College and Teacher College of Columbia University. And it is my pleasure to introduce tonight Dr. Adine Usher.
Dr. Jones, thank you so much. Thank you. For me, this is a real joy to be able to talk about my absolutely favorite subject. I think these kids are fantastic. I think they're valuable. I think they're brave, courageous, resilient, and I've worked not only with children with cerebral palsy, but since I've been doing this for so long, my children grow up. So now I'm working with adults with cerebral palsy.
And you know, Adine, that's so important because, again, this is why we are trying to empower our women because, again,
Yes.
they start as children and they grow into adulthood. And that's the hardest part. How do we get our nurturing moms, our moms, to talk or to understand a topic that is so sensitive for people?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you ask that question because my focus has been school age children, children from age 5 to 21. And frequently when I meet a family, I will ask them a question that totally throws them. I'll say, "Where do you want your son or daughter to be when they're 25?" And they're so involved in the medical management of cerebral palsy at age 5 that they haven't even thought about that. But I see these youngsters as being in transition from the very beginning because we know that life is going to be a physical, medical, cognitive, and social emotional challenge for them. So many of our youngsters are not gainfully employed because society is not willing to make the adaptations and modifications.
You know, that's so important that you speak of it. A lot of times, people, I guess, when they are first having to deal with and accepting the diagnosis of
Right,
cerebral palsy, when
right.
somebody says your child has cerebral palsy, people first have to go through those stages. They get angry, they start to grieve. But we do realize there are different degrees of cerebral palsy as well.
Yeah.
And how do we then come out of that state? And how do we get our women to understand that we can do this and it is functionable and doable? How do you recommend we do that?
Well, I think at the very beginning to realize that no two youngsters with CP are alike. And what you need to do is study the child very carefully. And I'm talking from an educator's perspective. You're looking from a physician's perspective. I'm looking for a parental and an educator's perspective. Study the children very closely, always. Find out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, see what you can do to lower the barriers in the areas that are challenging, but always in the back of your mind, think of them as young people who are going to grow up to have some degree of independence. It differs with each person, with each individual child. But you talked about the parental attitude for toward disability, and I just wanted to run something by you that I have in the book that I've written, Educating Students with Cerebral Palsy. I speak of parental responses to a diagnosis, and I have love and devastation, love and fear, love and anger, love and embarrassment, love and loneliness, love and guilt and blame, love and frustration, love and exhaustion, love and disgust, love and feelings of loss, love and resignation, love and doubt and denial, love and confusion. And then at the bottom, I have strength, hope, determination, gratitude, commitment, and perseverance. And
so that what you're saying, that is so valuable, because again, connecting that love part to it really builds that strength. But you also validated all of the feelings
that
that
are
somebody
legitimate.
could feel through, not even from infancy, but throughout life as they become into adults, like you said.
Yeah, someone once told me something really wise, and I've shared it with parents over the years. They said, go ahead, bury and mourn the child you were expecting, and learn to love and support the child you have. And this is something that all of us as parents have to do.
You're right. Because we don't know what God's going to give us, right?
No, and
so we have to accept what we have and
absolutely,
try and look at that glass as half full,
absolutely,
right? Not half empty.
not
Because
have them.
again, we need that strength and to be able to push that individual
Yes,
forward for growth.
right.
So let me ask you, you said one of the things that parents should do is study their children, right? And see how they can help to understand them to make the improvements. What are some of the things they should look for, Adine?
All right. Well, when I say study, I mean, first of all, understand as much as you possibly can the medical realities. For the first couple of years of a child's life with cerebral palsy, the life is full of doctors, orthopedic surgeons, physiatrists, developmental pediatricians, and to help protect the child from other people's ignorance. That's my way of putting it. You need to know as much as you can about how CP affects your youngster. And you need to be able to share that information with teachers. You need to be able to talk intelligently with therapists. You need to be able to speak up forcefully in IEP meetings, those school meetings, and not be intimidated. You need to be able to say, whoops, I don't understand what you're talking about. Because as you know, medical professions and therapists love to throw around that lingo.
So let me ask you another question. When somebody gets that diagnosis of cerebral palsy, and what kind of questions would you recommend to the patient that some list of questions that they should start to ask the doctors? Because what you did, you gave a whole list of different people they're going to have to see.
Right.
And that can become overwhelming and
It,
challenging for
it
people.
can.
So,
It can.
how could we help them, or how can we empower our women to find navigators? Is there such a thing as a navigator to
Un-
help with this?
Unfortunately, in special education, the closest thing we come to are advocates, but they are not navigators, because one of the biggest problems in the school, if you're talking about a special ed system, you find more people who understand the complexities of CP, but not always. If you're talking about general education inclusion, it is very hard to find general ed teachers who have any degree of expertise in cerebral palsy. So it becomes an immediate job of educating everybody. In terms of what parents want to ask physicians, they certainly want to know prognosis, although doctors cannot give that right away
Right.
because CP changes. Everyone wants their child to walk. Well, guess what? Not all children will walk, and that's okay. That's okay. And we don't want to spend so much time focusing on walking. And whoops, by the time the child's 15, we forgot to teach him to read. Now, see, I happen to think reading is more important than walking. So you have to identify those things you can improve. There is no cure with cerebral palsy. There's only maintenance, improvement, depending on how severe it is. So what are the strategies, either medical or educational or therapeutic, that limit the barriers and make a child more comfortable, happier, more interested in school, more interested in people outside of his or her own bodies? Because our youngsters, everyone is focused on our youngsters so much that frequently they are focused on themselves too, and
Absolutely.
are not aware that they're only one of a billion people on the planet.
Right, right. So, how can we get our parents to be more comfortable in themselves? Are there any support groups that you could
Oh,
recommend
yes.
for our parents? Because again, this is a hard journey to
It is
walk
a
through.
very hard journey, and I'd like to speak about Black mothers if I can, if I could be
Please do.
specific. Yes, because we are certainly not all alike. But whether whether you're native born African American or a Caribbean born Black person, we as women tend to think that, oh, we need to keep all this to ourselves, and we don't ask for enough help. I've found this so often that we almost have to suffer on our own. We have to do it all and make it all right ourselves. And this is too much for anyone to carry. But a lot of us come from cultures that sort of shy away from the medical. What I've learned in the work I've done in Trinidad is that a lot of the parents are ashamed of their children. A lot of the families are ashamed of the children, and we get this in this country too. Um, and if I can just use myself as an example here, 14 years ago I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I told one of my very, very close friends, a woman who had graduated from Howard and did all sorts of interesting things, and the first thing she said was, "You're not going to tell anybody, are you?" And I said, "I'm going to tell anybody who will listen, because I can't do this alone."
Right, right.
So the same thing holds true for parents of children who are medically involved and have very complex disabilities. The parents need to ask for help, accept help, demand help when they don't get it. Don't sit meekly and quietly by and be intimidated by people's degrees. Okay. because the people with degrees go home at 3 o'clock and you go home to the reality.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Well, like you said, that reality doesn't stop. So I think what you just said that was key is one, not recreate the wheel, share your information, whether it's a good diagnosis or a bad
Right.
diagnosis. And no diagnosis is bad except for death, right? If we
But it's
think of it,
normal.
right? Right. And secondly, because if you're sharing something, somebody else may have gone through it and can give
Absolutely.
you information. The
Absolutely.
other thing that I think that the audience needs to hear that you said that was very important is do not be afraid to ask more questions. If you don't understand it, say to that doctor, tell me in a different way, or
That's right.
say to that physical therapist, what else can I do? Or what can I do at home? What additional exercises?
Yes.
But like you said, sometimes people may be a little tired when they get home from working and then having to come home and
Oh,
do that second job. But that's where it takes a village sometimes
that's
and
what
other
it
family members to
does.
help.
I would also suggest that parents associate themselves with organizations like Adapt Community Network, which is the new name for United Cerebral Palsy of New York City. They have absolutely wonderful programs in every borough. There's let me see here, the Weinberg Family Center at Columbia Presbyterian. They have a CP center, which is amazing. I go to many of their lectures. And it gets mothers and fathers and caregivers of kids with CP together.
I
You
see.
really you need to be communicating with other people who are sharing your issues, no matter what your issues are. If you're the parent of a child on the autism spectrum, you need to be gathering together in groups. Uh, um, I recall a number of years ago meeting a Haitian woman um, who was ashamed to come to school because she was ashamed of her child's CP. And
Hmm.
and when and she thought God had punished her. And finally, when I got my hands on the family, graduation day, um, and she just broke down crying. And I talked with her for hours and got her signed up with parent support groups and working with a psychologist and a social worker. But she was carrying all this pain and misunderstanding herself.
And see, what you did was so very important. You were able to get into touching her soul as well as her spirit. And
Yes,
why I say it that way is because two reasons. She was feeling that guilt that you listed earlier,
right,
right?
right,
She felt she did something wrong.
right.
And also, you voiced how she felt of being ashamed. And, you know, it would have been so great if you could have touched her early
Oh,
because it would have made things move along in such a way. But again, whatever chance we get to touch that individual is so very important, whether it's early
or
or
late.
or
Yeah.
late. The
And
point is we touch.
something else I want to say, I also find parents, mostly mothers, who become depressed when uninformed, unenlightened relatives and community members say things which are very hurtful and very painful. Um, and I mean, it doesn't come from evil, it comes from their lack of understanding. I think of one mother in Connecticut who said, I just had to finally divorce my mother in law because every time she came to our house, it was, what can we do to cure him? And it was terrible. And she just literally had to divorce her mother-in-law
You
because
know, and like you said, it's hard because then they're feeling and carrying that guilt. And that's why shows like All About Us Radio and us meeting and talking about this helps those families and those women to understand what's out there and the resources that they have so that we can help them. Even if they have to divorce family members,
you may
not
have to. Sometimes
legally,
divorce is a
but
good thing. Yeah. Also looking at the youngsters and realizing that this is the norm for your youngster. There's a Harvard professor whose name escapes me right now that did some interesting research on multiple norms. Your norm is whoever you are.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And it's not I will love you when you learn to walk. It's I will love you
Right.
just
That's how you started. Remember, it was love with the other adjective,
right.
love with the other
Right. But
noun.
love and acceptance. Now let's see how strong and independent and capable we can make you. And it's different for every youngster.
Can you give some suggestions on how people can word topics when people are misinformed, like this mother in law, on how to cure? So, those are uncomfortable situations for people, right, Adine?
Yeah.
So, how, if you were going to, if I was the person who was dealing with the child with disabilities, and I'm so hurt now, how could I word it in such a way that I could tell my mother-in-law, hey, what you're saying is hurtful for me,
Well,
or for my child as
yeah.
well?
I first of all, I think there are two possibilities. Either the relative is approachable or the relative will never be approachable, in which case you have to keep toxic people out of your life. But I think that many people in an older generation, and when I say that, older than I am, like my mother and her mother and all, um, they had a very unfortunate attitude toward disability. A disabled person in the family was put away someplace and
Right,
nobody
right,
talked about them. We don't do that now. So
right.
if you can calm your anger enough to try to bring this person along, you'll try to explain in a loving and an intelligent way what CP is, what it isn't, how it developed. No, it's no one's fault. This is what brain damage looks like. By the way, everybody has some damage in their brain. There is no such thing as a perfect brain. Um, and so that education at the level at which the person can take it.
Right.
I think as an educator, and I see so many teachers afraid of these youngsters, literally afraid. There's lack of knowledge. So my book tries to. Can I hold it up for a second?
Absolutely. And eventually we'll put it in the chat as well.
Okay. All right. It's just full of easy to read, easy to understand information. When you finish this, you will, and it's thick, but that's okay. Um, it's easy to understand information. Information usually helps to dampen those prejudicial attitudes and fear. I mean, I've gone in, I do a lot of observations in schools that have inclusion programs.
Right,
And I
right,
think of one young boy, 15 years old, very severe spastic CP, nonverbal, intelligent. See, so nonverbal does not mean non-intelligent, but his body was a challenge.
right.
His vision was a challenge because vision's a part of it too. Um, he went to one class, a history class, and the teacher just did absolutely everything to make sure that he was part of the lesson. 2 hours later, I follow him into a math class taught by a newly minted PhD, really great math teacher who never looked at him once.
That's hard. It's hard for the student, and it makes it uncomfortable,
I
right?
was I was angry.
And rightfully so. And I think that's really important. And here we are now at a point and a segment of this show. Here we are to empower women. Now, what do? We need to go up to the school. We need to have a conversation with that instructor and the principal, because this is a human being. This
Yeah.
is somebody who wants to learn. And it is our responsibility, like you said, Adine, and you as an educator, to make sure that everybody has equitable knowledge and teaching and care.
And as Black mothers and Black women, we also need to realize that when we go up to the principal and the teacher and make demands, our demands may not initially be respected as much as our white counterparts.
Correct.
Because race does come into this all the time.
Absolutely. And again, race and its biases as well.
That's what I mean.
Right. And so it's important that even if you feel uncomfortable talking about this, having an advocate to come with
Yes.
you will make a big difference.
Absolutely.
And yes, your book may be thick, but I want the audience to know it is a book that everybody should have because it can be used as a reference.
Well,
so we
that's
put in the chat that it's available on Amazon as well as Barnes and Nobles, the title, because this is so important for our families and especially our mothers and Black and Latino mothers
right.
to know what they need to do when they're going into the schools, what they may need to say so that they're prepared.
Yeah. It was sad and interesting that there are pictures of three youngsters on the front of the book, and the first picture is my dear friend, the late Verna Hart, who had two youngsters with CP, the one in the wheelchair and the girl standing next to her. And just to show you how racism comes into it, every time or many times when Verna would take Yubi, the child in the wheelchair, young woman now in the wheelchair, into a physician, the white physician would ask, "Have you been on drugs?"
Right. I mean, drugs doesn't cause CP either.
No correlation whatsoever. But I mean, these are the racial inequities we have to include in addition to the medical and health problems of CP.
And that is why having this show is so important for people to understand how do we start breaking down those barriers of how physicians address people of color, how they address people in general, right? Not just people of color.
Right.
Because it's so important that we have an open dialogue and communication.
Right.
Because again, we want to make sure that everybody is getting, equitable care and good health care with it.
Well, part of that is demanding good care. And of course, when I say demanding, I don't mean walking into the doctor's office in a fit of rage. I mean, really standing your ground and forcing the person to respect you as you ask questions and talk.
And that's why having the knowledge and being prepared, right, and having your book as a resource really helps with understanding these are the questions I can ask when I go in.
Right.
And again, and I'm not sure if it's on audio yet, like audiobook.
No. I will not. Whoops, just 1 second. I will not at this point. It's not on audiobook. And if people want it on a Kindle type where they can, in other words, that they want a digital version, they should contact me and I will send them a PDF.
Okay.
I had to. This was done self-published, and you'll be interested in why. I went to the major publishing houses for a couple of months, the ones that do books on disability. And they said, "Oh, Dr. Usher, we love your writing. We love the title. We love this. We love that. But there's no money in cerebral palsy." That's what they said.
But and that's the hard thing. There's no money in disabilities. And that's why we see so many people are challenged now. This is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Right.
And we are seeing how it is affecting our communities,
right.
especially our Black and Brown communities. Right.
Right.
And it's hard. There's no funding. They've closed psychiatric facilities. There's no resources. Things on telehealth now.
Right.
There's no one-to-one interaction.
Right.
And so we have to find resources. So I'm sorry you even face those barriers, but you
But
didn't let it stop you.
no, I took my own money and I went to a self-publishing company and I did it myself.
And for
And
that,
now
I applaud you.
and now I'm trying to get it translated into Spanish because there are many, many parents in the Hispanic community, Latino community that really need this information too.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Are your listeners aware that there are significantly more Black children than white children in the United States that have CP?
They may not be. So what
Yeah.
is that ratio?
Well, let's see. I don't have the stats right in front of me. I mean, some people say few more, and others, the CDC uses the word significant. Um, and the reason for that is the high number of preterm births and multiple births.
And I was just going to say, because again, that is one of the risk factors in our African American community when we talk about maternal health, that we as African American women have a higher incidence of preterm deliveries than when compared to our white counterparts.
And
And we also have so many other comorbidities, hypertension, diabetes, you know, deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolism that may require early deliveries as
right.
well.
And I didn't realize it, but I did realize it because I have twins, and I learned 56 years ago that African Americans have the highest rate of twinning, whites have the second, and Asians have the third. But
Right.
if you look on your cell phone and you say, where in the world are the greatest number of twins, you will find the Bight of Biafra,
Hmm.
and which is along the coast of West Africa. Now, you also will know that hundreds and thousands of enslaved people were stolen from that area of West
Absolutely.
Africa. So we brought that with us in our DNA.
Correct. Correct.
So twinning and twins almost always are, as I don't need to tell you as an OBGYN, twins are almost always early.
Correct. Correct. And it's a challenge. And sometimes, people hold on to thinking the results of CP is something that the doctor may have done wrong. And that's not the case.
No,
It may be because of the prematurity that there was, once the baby comes out, sometimes they also may have some underlying cardiac issues that may have not been picked up and can lead to decreased oxygenation during that time as
right,
well.
right.
So there's so much important that we are getting out here today to our audience. And it's so very important that we share this information with our community.
Yeah, the book lists two pages of causes of CP, but it also introduces the word idiopathic. And by the way, there's a huge glossary, and there is no term in the text which is not defined as you're reading. Idiopathic means we haven't got a clue. We
Absolutely.
don't know. And
And sometimes it's hard for our parents to hear that because they always think the doctor has an answer to
no,
everything,
no,
right? And that it's black and white.
no.
And I have to say to them, sometimes medicine is gray matter zone. It's that black and white meshed together
Meshed
where we
together.
don't always have an absolute answer for
Right.
you.
And as you very well know, there's a lot of research being done on hereditary causes, that a lot of CP, which they thought was idiopathic, no
Maybe
known cause, now might have
genetics
a genetic
and genetic links. Yes.
links.
I
So it's
think,
very interesting.
yes, it's just so much and it's so fascinating because,
Yes.
again, it is not even just cerebral palsy, it's just even the neurological, like you said, developments that people face, right?
Yeah.
And so we are so lucky now that we have testing and DNA testing that we can do and genetic testing that
Right.
we can find more information. So to share with the audience, like you shared as well, my oldest one has major disabilities too, not cerebral palsy,
Right.
but nonverbal autistic. And
Oh,
back then, genetic testing was now coming out for Fragile X.
okay.
Again, my son does not have Fragile X, but again, it was something that was not also covered by the insurance company
Oh,
as well. And genetic testing was extremely expensive. And I remember I was a resident, so again, not making a lot of money, still sort of
yeah.
kind of in my training, and saying to determine what I would do in the future, we needed to do this testing. And it was like 900 and something dollars. And back then, that was a
A
lot of
lot of
money,
money. Yeah.
right? You know?
Right.
And so it was well worth doing. And now it's standard as part of the obstetrical panel for
Right.
people, right? So it's nice to see how the pendulum
Mm,
swings.
Queen, yes.
And it's important for if there's things in people's family or family history along the way,
Mm,
that patients, when they go in, share that information with their
right.
doctors so that they can do testing
Do
early.
test. Right. Right. Very good. All right.
So, what is your thought when, like you gave the example of that young man, in the math class?
Yes.
What is your thought for a parent? How should they approach the school to handle situations like this?
That is an interesting question because frequently parents are afraid to complain so much. They are afraid that the school will even ignore their child more. I remember when I was a health coordinator, as a building level administrator in charge of a large orthopedic unit. Um, a mother came into my office, please, please take my child, please. I said, you don't have to beg. This is what I'm getting paid for. This is my job. And if I don't take your daughter and try to do a good job, that's my fault. That's on
Right,
me.
right, right.
So they need to be less apologetic and more forceful about what's going on. And I'm not pleased with this. And what do we need to improve it? There is too much reticence frequently to speak up and demand what you think your child deserves.
Yeah. So, how do we get into the school districts? How do we get into the communities? How do you suggest we work within our communities to have support groups? How do we develop little support groups within even some of our schools for families? How do you suggest we do that?
Support groups, well, there's the formal support group, that is the PTA. Now, the PTA in a general ed setting is not likely to meet the needs of a special needs parent that much. Whereas the parent association in a special school, like the Henry Viscardi School, that I've been affiliated with for the last 26 years, that's a powerful group of parents. Um, there are also parent groups that function outside of the school, and they provide support for one another. I have frequently been invited to speak to groups like that to help them make more progress in inclusion programs. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah.
So, schools like the Henry Viscardi schools and other schools, you said it's a very strong school. Are there wait lists or is it easy to get your kids into schools like that?
Um, as you know Henry Viscardi very well, I'm sure. Um, it is a state-supported private school, a 4201 school. They get private funds and they get state-supported funds. And if you want your child to go to a place like Viscardi, and a child has cerebral palsy, or any range of uh, uh, um, orthopedic, cerebral palsy is a neuromuscular condition, as opposed to congenital amputee, which is an orthopedic condition. The difference being with a neuromuscular, you have to have brain damage, which affects functioning. All
Right.
right. And then they have a whole host of other medically fragile children, children who are on respirators. They have a small hospital there. Parents would go to their local committee on special education and then make an application from that. The application goes to the state approves it, and then Viscardi has to approve it, and the child is either accepted or not accepted.
Interesting.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough of these schools in the United States.
Right.
I would love to see a Henry Viscardi in all 50 states. I think that we are pushing too many youngsters into inclusion when school systems are saying we can do the job and they're not, and they don't want to.
Interesting.
They're not. I differ from many of my colleagues who say, "Oh no, inclusion is the road for everyone." Well, no one solution is right for any one problem.
Correct. Correct.
Any problem. Are there several children at Viscardi who probably could function in an inclusion program? Yes, but they love the socialization of being around their peers.
Right. So let's ask about other private locations that people may have. Like you said, there are not enough schools like the Viscardi School.
They're both
Is
these.
there a way that may inclusion program, and then if that's not working for them, they then go into or can be placed on a wait list?
Actually, yes, we tend to get at Viscardi, we tend to get a boost of youngsters coming in at the junior high level. Their parents wanted inclusion, wanted them in their home district, in their neighborhood schools with their sisters and brothers. And then they discovered that as the youngsters get older, they may be falling behind the neurotypical children academically, and they're certainly falling behind in terms of socialization. Many of them are just plain lonely. So there's an interesting bump in our population around 7th and 8th grade, where they finally have a wheelchair basketball team and a wheelchair hockey team, and they have girlfriends and boyfriends, and they go to proms, and they are truly around a community of their peers. Now, they don't stay there. They have to graduate and go back into the real world. But many times when they do return to the real world, they feel better about themselves.
Absolutely. You know, because again, there was inclusion at that point in a different way. Not inclusion through school, but inclusion through them as their own little community.
It's sort of like HBCUs.
Exactly. So this last half of the show, let's talk about, like you said, you know, they're growing up. They're getting older. The parents are now getting older. They've aged out of their programs.
Yeah.
What is out there and what can we continue to do?
Okay.
What resources can our mothers do for these women and men now that they've gotten older?
The first thing I think is for parents to realize when youngsters are getting ready to graduate or age out at 21, because most of these youngsters can stay on the state's payroll until age 20, 21 in terms of school. They need to realize that they are no longer little children. We tend to infantilize people with disabilities. I mean, it's very, very difficult to see a 21-year-old who's still not toilet trained as a 21-year-old, but they are.
Right.
They're 21 years old. And you want to look for a different life. I think the worst thing we can do is hold on to them in the family. If there's a possibility of group homes or other sort of residences, because if you hold on to a disabled adult child until the parents die. They are totally
Dependent.
unprepared to meet the world. That's my feeling. And it's shared by some research.
Right.
So people, I was talking to a fellow yesterday who is Richard Ellenson, who wrote the foreword for the book, who is the father of a 25-year-old boy with severe spastic CP nonverbal. He was able to afford an apartment below his for his son. So the son lives downstairs, has his own attendant, but this is a family with means.
Right.
But there are medical group homes, there are group homes, and there are supervised work programs, depending on the level of a person's intellectual and social development.
You know, I think fear for some people, especially people of color, is the fear that their loved one may be mistreated, right? Those are always fear, especially for people who may not be verbal to be able to express
Okay,
those concerns.
I can address that. They're absolutely right in their fear. We have to be realistic. We have to be realistic about the fact that a lot of people in the society do not value us. I mean, that's just fact, right?
Right.
I have, for the last 17 years, been a court-appointed guardian for a young woman who is now 44, profound CP, is totally dependent in all areas of daily living. And I had her in a medical group home. Now I have her at the Terence Cardinal Cook Specialty Hospital. When I was asked by the judge to take this case over, she came with a multi-million-dollar medical malpractice suit. And somebody said, oh, you can send her to one of these fancy places upstate. No way. I wanted to keep her in town where her siblings could visit her every week, where I could check on her every month. And I knew she would be surrounded by people who respected and cared for her.
So, may I ask, in your book, do you have some resources for facilities like this for people who are aging?
What I do have in the chapter on transitions is the recommendation that you rely on transition specialists and social workers and psychologists who have all of those resources at their fingertips.
Got it.
I have discovered in life that it's not important that we have all the answers. We just need to know where to get
Where
them.
to get them. Excellent, excellent. So at least, like I said, that book has really great resources
Resources.
that it can allow an individual to navigate through
Yes.
things,
Yeah.
which is
Now,
really important.
for adults now, I mean, there's the ARC, the Association for Retarded Children, which is a very old and good organization. There's Only Adults with CP it's an online face group for
Okay.
adults with cerebral palsy. Then there's state organizations that cover people with physical and intellectual disabilities. There's no shortage of organizations. It's just getting to the right person who will direct you to them.
Excellent, excellent. So, as we're coming closer to the end of the show, what are some of the key takeaways that you think parents, i.e., and our women, because again, this show is about empowering women, should think about?
Educating yourself and educating everybody who comes in contact with your child as your child is growing up, so that stupid mistakes are not made.
Excellent.
Put it as simply as that. If we don't know what we're doing, we're going to make mistakes, no matter what the field. All right. Do not do it alone. Do not isolate yourself. Do not let anybody make you feel guilty. do what you have to do, and also take care of yourself. We haven't talked about that much. And I don't know if on this show you've talked about April Ryan's book, Black Women Will Save the World.
No, we have not. We might have to go
Oh,
there for another
this is
session.
this is go-to. This was my Christmas present from my partner. And April Ryan, who was a White House correspondent and a Black woman of note, um, talks about the fact that, yeah, Black women have done amazing things out in our community and outside of our community, but we're not good at taking care of ourselves.
We have to have those mindful moments,
Oh,
right? Because again, the only way we could take care of our loved ones is for us to be able to take care of ourselves first, so
yes.
that we can have that energy and we can be grounded to take care of our family members the
Yeah.
way
And
they need to be taken care of.
one thing women really could do is to start pushing for respite programs for families. I am fortunate enough to have done a lot of international travel, and I visited programs for youngsters, to students with CP all over Europe, New Zealand, Australia. And what I notice is many of these countries have standard respite programs. So in Switzerland, for example, if your kid has CP or any other disabling condition, a social worker will call the parents and say, "How you doing? You want to go away with your husband for a weekend? We'll send somebody into the family." And this is paid for by the state. Well, these are countries that have socialized medicine, dirty
Right.
word. All right. But we're starting a respite program at Viscardi because we saw through the pandemic how our parents just were stretched beyond human.
And not only that, I think the pandemic shed a lot of light on resources. Even though there's financial resources, we
Right,
lost a lot of individuals that were once going into the schools and going into the homes in the
right,
community. We lost a lot of services for in-house services
right,
for our disabled individuals.
right,
During the pandemic, I know for sure we kept our son because of COVID. He couldn't wear a mask due to,
right,
the
right,
textile stuff. He was home for 22 months. And when we had to transition him back into his day program, it came with a little bit of a challenge. And
mm,
also trying to get people to come in. You know, organizations weren't allowing the people to come in because of testing and
right,
COVID. And
right,
so the challenges were there and programs were shut down,
right, right,
right?
right.
So it became very challenging. But reintroducing, him back into the program was also a challenge because he had been
Course.
away for so
For a
long as
long
well.
time. And transitions for many people with disabilities are very challenging.
Yes, yes. So it's important. And like you, I share those informations. It's not easy, but it's important for people
Yeah.
to know that everything's not always hunky dory. We all
No,
have,
we
our
all.
situations that we have to address and
Right,
bring to the forefront.
right.
So I think you brought up so many good resources. Your book provides resources. The audience can look and get your book on both Amazon and Barnes and Nobles.
Right.
And the fact that you said there's a PDF for those who may want a Kindle version and they can reach out to you for that.
Reach
And
out
you
to
also shared Black Women Will Save the World by April Ryan, which is
yes.
something that I will try
It's a
and get as well.
it's really very uplifting. But she really she doubles down on this being everything to everybody all the time. We can't do it.
Right. Because it burns you out.
It burns us out. Yeah. Yeah. It burns
It
us out.
burns us out.
Yeah. So anyway.
We touched on a lot of amazing topics tonight. And this was so enlightening for me, and I'm sure for the audience as well. And I want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us this evening.
So
But I
Joy,
want to see if anybody has any questions that may come into the chat that maybe we did not address. Or let me ask you, do you think there's something that we didn't address
well, I
as we
want
had this?
Well, I wanted to say, going back to the school IEP meetings, which in which where you have a room full of teachers, a room full of therapists, uh, administrators, and one parent. And that can be very, very daunting. And you know what I'm talking about because you've experienced that. But you're not a shrinking violet, so I'm sure you hold your own. Don't sign anything you don't agree with. All right, don't. And if you can't come to an agreement with the school, then you may have to go to impartial arbitration. That's where you almost in a court-like situation have to come to an agreement with the school system, but hold firm to your desires for your child. Also,
Dean, I want to go back to what you said, and I want to break this down a little further.
yes,
You're 100% correct about not signing some of these IEP
yeah,
reports that they sent. And it becomes very thick and it could be wordy and it could be intimidating for parents.
yeah,
If there's something that you don't understand or is written in a language that is not clear, have somebody read it to you so that you can understand it.
right,
Because if reading may be challenging for you, or they may be using
right,
bigger words that you don't understand,
precisely.
have somebody read it to you before you sign something that has to do with your child, and then they cannot get the resources that they need, or it's inappropriate. And you say, "Oh, they never discussed that with me."
That's
And they're
right.
going to say, "Oh, yes, you signed this IEP."
That's right.
Right?
That's
So
what I
again,
meant.
do not be afraid to ask somebody to help you with this. This is where that village comes in.
The village comes in here, and also, and one of the things that I do mention in the book is, and I hope schools take this recommendation, do not have at the meetings the first time you read everybody's reports. People should be getting these reports in their hands. It benefits not only the parents, but it benefits the other members of the team, the teachers, the therapists, to see what other people are observing and doing. Because you may discover, the PT may discover that she's running into the same issues that the adaptive sports person is running into, or the OT is running into issues that the assistant teacher is running into. So you need time to read these reports and digest them, not just look at them, thank you, and sign off.
Understood. There is one question in the chat that says, is it hard to deal or to understand a child or an adult to help them resolve their feelings, especially, I guess, if they're nonverbal or they're having issues? How do we help them to feel and understand? And I'm not sure.
Oh, I understand exactly what they're saying, and that's a magnificent question. Um, Most children in both special ed and general ed settings have access to counselors and psychologists. And we know that children with physical disabilities, when they look around the rest of the world and see that most of the world is running and climbing and riding bicycles, many of them have very negative feelings about that. Some of them are made to feel that there's something really wrong with them. One woman, an adult with CP, said that when I was a child, my parents told me not to look in the mirror because they didn't want me to see what I really look like. So they're getting these negative messages from the family and from the school and from society. So our children are, whenever they have a chance, they need support and counseling and help.
And also positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement. And of course, as adults, there is now a very strong move toward creating communities of disability where people with disabilities say, there's nothing wrong with this. This is who, going back to this is who we are. You don't have to feel sorry for us. This is who we are.
Absolutely.
But you really, if, and with a nonverbal child, there are speech therapists have strategies to work with nonverbal children. There are all kinds of ways using adaptive technology, using computers, using iPads. You can reach a nonverbal child just fine.
Absolutely. Okay, I don't see any further questions right now in the chat. We touched upon so many different things. But again, is there anything that we didn't touch upon that you would like to share before we close out the end of our show that you think our audience needs to know?
Oh, I just want to say how grateful I am to talk about my favorite subject. I mean,
I'm glad.
I think these children are just magnificent. I'm intellectually fascinated by the challenges that CP presents. Um, I just I want the school systems to take our youngsters more seriously and value them more. And with that increased value will come increased funding, because we in this capitalistic society, we pay for what we value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to end the show. We're going to have our sponsors that we usually take a break sometime through the show to have our commercial break. But the topic and the conversation was so robust, I didn't want to stop. So we're just going to close out the show and then have our commercial. And I want to thank you, Dr. Usher, for being my guest for this
Dr.
evening
Jones, it
on
was
such a
beautiful.
really important topic.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I could talk for
Absolutely.
hours.
Absolutely. Okay.
Hello, this is Najesti from Butter Me Essentials Natural Hair and Body Company. We are located in Brooklyn, New York. We are a family-owned company, which is run by my husband Vaden and I. Do you have hair that is hard to manage? Having trouble with hair growth? Is your skin always dry? No problem. Butter Me Essentials is here with the solution. We specialize in hair butters, pomades, hair elixirs, shampoos, conditioners, luxury soaps, body butters, lotion bars, perfumes, scrubs, and so much more. All of our products is made with natural and organic ingredients such as shea butter, cocoa butter, mango butter, Jamaican black castor oil, avocado oil, Oregon oil, and essential oils. There is no sulfates, petroleum, mineral oils, or parabens, just all natural goodness. If you would like to order our products, check out our website at buttermeessentials.com, buttermeessentials.com, or call 646-524-3351, 646-524-3351. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Remember, like our motto says, you deserve to be buttered.